Hello there! Welcome to my new video series on the weapons of Mordhau. A new series dedicated to tantalizing the bloodthirsty historical nerd hiding within all of us. From the Longsword to the Bardiche and much more, this series will cover a vast array of armaments. We aim to satiate any and all taste in weaponry. The format of these videos will be as follows. First, we shall discuss, in brief, the history and description of the weapon in question in the real world. Second, we will discuss how the weapon is portrayed in Mordhau, also giving a brief guide on how to effectively use the weapon. Last, we will rank the weapon in terms of its pros and cons versus other weapons within the game. Well, enough babbling. Let's crack on to the nitty-gritty of it, shall we? First, the history. For many, the longsword is the quintessential weapon of Europe during the late medieval and Renaissance periods. That is, the time period between 1300 and 1600 AD. A longsword typically describes a sword made from steel. Its hilt is shaped much like a cross, with room on the grip such that it can be used with two hands. The blade is double-edged, and the blade length can vary from about 85 to 110 centimeters, or 33 to 43 inches. Depending on construction, the longsword's mass can vary from about 2 to 3.5 pounds. The cross-section of the blade can vary wildly also, depending on the era and time period in which the weapon originated. Now that we have learned a little bit about the longsword, let's begin our discussion on its role in Mordhau. The models for the longsword in Mordhau are spot on in relation to their real-life counterparts. The crossguard and hilt options in Mordhau are very similar to those seen throughout the Middle Ages. The longsword models in Mordhau, however, typically lack the embellishments such as engravings and flared handguards that were common amongst the longswords found during the Renaissance period. The specially engraved longsword awarded to those who backed the Kickstarter at the higher levels, of course, is an exception to this trend. The combat in Mordhau is by nature not designed to be realistic. One developer once commented that if they intended to make the game realistic, they would have added wrestling, but they opted to make a balanced, skill-based game instead. With that said, not all elements of combat with the longsword in Mordhau are necessarily inaccurate. The stance one starts out with in the game is that of a typical sword grip. Two hands at the hilt, one atop the other, with the sword held toward the side of the body with the dominant hand. The strikes in this stance have medium range and medium speed, with the typical exception of a stab being slightly faster. This stance is ideal for fighting unarmored opponents at medium range, and this technique would be very similar to the German sword fighting technique known as Blossfechten, or bear fighting, that is, fighting without armor. The other stance available for use with the longsword in Mordhau is the Mordhau grip, a term derived from the German fighting technique known as Moorstrike, or murder strike in English. In this technique, one grips their sword by the blade and uses the hilt and crossguard as an improvised hammer. This is useful because the center of mass of the sword is closer to the grip, thus allowing more concussive force to be exerted through the weapon because of torque. This technique would be very effective against an armored opponent, but puts one at severe disadvantage in terms of attacking range. Basic usage guide and rank. The longsword is an ideal weapon for most situations. In combat, it fares well against smaller weapons such as the mace and arming sword due to its medium range capabilities. Occasionally the mace, or a messer, may catch one off guard because you're more apt to deal with the timing of other swords that share the release time of the longsword. If you encounter an enemy with a mace, you can switch to the Mordhau grip for faster swing speed, throwing your opponent off guard. Make sure to close the distance, otherwise you will miss when you swing and get two-tapped by the mace. Another important thing to note is that one should attack several times with their primary stance before switching to the Mordhau grip to attack. This is more likely to throw your enemy off guard and allow for that precise difference in timing so that you can land and nail a couple hits on them. Being nearly mid-tier in all ways, the longsword is also fairly well suited for use against other mid-tier weapons. The longsword's biggest weakness is fighting polearms at a distance. If one closes the distance, they can easily take out those wielding these deadly weapons. We will rank the longsword based on 5 categories, with a possible 5 out of 5 stars in each category. The first will be the general utility of the weapon, that is, how its stats fare compared to that of other weapons. Since the longsword is versatile in most situations, and only lacks in terms of its maximum range effectiveness, it will receive a rating of 4 out of 5 stars. This is primarily because the longsword is slightly faster than most other weapons, and slightly longer as well. These two attributes paired together make it useful for fighting against nearly all weapon types. The primary cons being fighting against a pole weapon at distance, particularly in team battles. The The second category will be performance and dueling. This is because Mordhau is heavily focused on skill-based gameplay. Dueling is one of the easiest ways to compare yourself against other players, especially if you do several duels in a row. Because of the longsword's versatility and speed, it is an ideal weapon for dueling. The increased striking distance of polearms can become largely ineffective against a good longswordsman in dueling if they know how to close the distance. The longsword will receive a 5 out of 5 score in dueling effectiveness. The third category is team play. How does a longsword stack up against other weapons in a team battle? The longsword's medium range effectiveness and quick attack speed make it a good team-based weapon. It can quickly dispatch users of smaller swords because of extra range, and its slower speed is rarely a hindrance. However, its longer length than other arms can occasionally result in team damage for inexperienced users on the wind-up. Since longsword users often make up the front runs in a battle, they become the target of polearm users since they can get attacked over the shoulder or through the crevices where players stand when engaged in combat with one another. For team play, the longsword will receive a 3 out of 5 rating. The fourth category is a random category. This week's random category is general aesthetic. Since Mordhau is by its nature a game whose ins and outs are based on melee combat set near the Middle Ages, the first weapon to come to mind is a longsword. For this reason, paired with the fact that I find the weapon sexy, the longsword will receive a 5 out of 5 stars. This results in a total rating of 17 out of 20 stars. If you enjoyed the video, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and like the video for more. Next week I'll be trying to release another video of this format. However, I'd like it if you guys would vote to choose the next weapon. Go ahead and throw your suggestions for the next weapon of Mordhau video in the comments below. The most commented choice will be the subject of next week's video. If there is a tie, one weapon will be randomly selected for the next week's video. Thanks for watching, and hope to see you next time.